A janitor? Dressed like that? The billionaire's words, thick with disbelief and disdain, sliced through the glittering halls of New York's elite. He had invited her, a black janitor, expecting humiliation, not the breathtaking vision now commanding the room in gold satin. She has endured whispered slurs, dismissive glances, and the sting of invisibility in a world ruled by power and privilege. Yet beneath her poised exterior lies a secret that could shatter an empire. Will her courage turn mockery into justice, or will the weight of prejudice crush her? Stick with us to uncover a tale of betrayal and triumph that will keep you hooked. Don't miss out. Subscribe for more gripping stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. What truth does she carry, and how far will she go? Stay tuned to find out. The Empire Grand Hotel in Manhattan buzzed with frenetic energy, its marble corridors alive with the clatter of heels and the low hum of anticipation. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across gilded walls, each flicker a silent promise of the grandeur to come. The Langford family, titans of New York's real estate world, were orchestrating their centennial gala, a spectacle to cement their legacy. At the heart of it stood Thomas Langford, a man whose arrogance was as sharp as the creases in his tailored suit. His graying temples and steely gaze betrayed a soul perpetually chasing the shadow of his father, Edward Langford, whose name still evoked reverence long after his death. In a secluded boardroom, Thomas presided over a tense meeting. The air was thick with the scent of polished oak and unease. The board, suits starched, egos inflated, clutched their leather portfolios, their murmurs halting as a single sheet of paper passed hand to hand. It was an anonymous letter, its typed words stark and accusing. Edward's true will had been buried, and a hidden heir walked among them. Thomas's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening around his coffee cup. "This is a prank," he snapped, though his voice wavered. "Some disgruntled fool trying to tarnish our name." William Carter, a retired confidant of Edward's, sat at the table's far end, his weathered hands folded. His silence was heavy, a mask for the guilt that gnawed at him. He was the letter's author, driven by a conscience too long suppressed, yet too cowardly to claim his truth aloud. His faded blue eyes avoided Thomas's glare, but his heart raced with the hope that this spark might ignite justice. Thomas's mind churned, sifting through faces, searching for the threat. His thoughts snagged on Amelia Price, a janitor whose presence near the archive room had caught his eye more than once. Amelia, with her quiet efficiency and unreadable gaze, seemed an unlikely foe, but paranoia painted her as a convenient suspect. "She's been snooping," Thomas muttered to his wife, Margaret, later that evening in their penthouse suite. The city skyline glittered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, a cold contrast to his simmering disdain. "That woman thinks she can play games with us." Margaret, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, sipped her martini. "A janitor?" she scoffed, her lips curling. "She wouldn't dare show her face at the gala. And if she does, she'll be the evening's entertainment." Thomas's laughter was a low rumble, his confidence bolstered by the prospect of control. "Let's invite her," he said, eyes glinting. "A public lesson in knowing her place. She'll crumble before the first toast." The idea took root, a cruel seed in fertile ground. The next morning, Thomas summoned his assistant, Clara, a prim woman whose loyalty was as crisp as her blazer. "Deliver this to Amelia Price," he instructed, handing her a cream envelope embossed with the Langford crest. "Make sure she knows it's for the gala. Evening attire required." Clara's brow arched, but she nodded, sensing the venom beneath his civility. Amelia Price stood in the dimly lit basement of the Langford headquarters, her hands steady as she polished a glass door. The hum of the vacuum cleaner was her only companion, its drone a shield against the world above. At 30, Amelia carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied her station. Her dark skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, her long black hair pulled into a neat bun. She was invisible to the executives who passed her daily, their eyes sliding over her like she was part of the furniture. But Amelia saw everything, their whispered slights, their casual cruelties. "She's diligent, but not one of us," a manager had once remarked within earshot, his tone dripping with condescension. Another had mused, "I bet she shops at thrift stores in Harlem. Can't imagine her in anything else. Clara's heels clicked down the stairs, breaking Amelia's rhythm. "This is for you," Clara said, her smile thin as she extended the envelope. "Mr. Langford insists you attend the gala. Proper attire, of course." The words were laced with mockery, a challenge wrapped in politeness. Amelia took the envelope, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm, though her pulse quickened. As Clara retreated, Amelia traced the golden crest with her thumb, sensing the trap within. Alone in her modest Brooklyn apartment that evening, Amelia sat at a scarred wooden table, the envelope before her. The room was small but warm, filled with the faint scent of lavender from a candle she'd lit. She slit the envelope open, revealing an invitation scripted in elegant calligraphy. Her lips pressed into a thin line. This was no gesture of inclusion. It was a dare, a public gauntlet meant to humiliate. She knew Thomas's kind, their smiles as sharp as knives, their words cloaked in civility. "She'll wear something cheap, probably borrowed," she'd overheard a board member chuckle once, dismissing her without a glance. Amelia rose and crossed to a closet, her movements deliberate. From its depths, she retrieved a locked wooden box, its surface worn but polished. Inside lay a treasure from her mother, Evelyn Price, the Langford family's former piano tutor. Amelia lifted a folded garment, a gown of gold satin, its asymmetrical neckline, and flowing train, a relic of elegance. Beside it rested a necklace, its pendant engraved with Edward's initials, and a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Never let them dim your light, my girl." Evelyn had taught her resilience, forged in a world that sought to erase her. Amelia held the gown against her frame, its fabric cool against her skin. She had spent 2 years in the Langfords' employ, not by chance but by design, piecing together fragments of her past. The archive room, with its dusty files, held secrets she was close to unearthing. This invitation, cruel as it was an opportunity, a stage to claim what was hers. Her reflection in a cracked mirror showed a woman unbroken, her dark eyes burning with resolve. In Manhattan, Thomas reclined in his study, a glass of bourbon in hand. The city's pulse thrummed beyond his window, a reminder of his dominion. "She won't come," he told Margaret, his voice smug. "And if she does, she'll regret it." His laughter was a predator's growl, blind to the storm gathering on the horizon. Amelia, back in her apartment, slipped the necklace around her neck, its weight a tether to her purpose. She whispered to herself, "This isn't just a gala, it's my reckoning." The city lights flickered outside, unaware that a single woman, armed with truth and tenacity, was about to upend an empire. The grand ballroom of the Empire Grand Hotel shimmered like a jewel, its towering chandeliers casting cascades of light across velvet drapes and polished parquet. The air buzzed with the clink of champagne flutes and the murmured boasts of New York's elite. Senators, tycoons, and media moguls, all gathered to toast the Langford dynasty's centennial. At the room's heart stood Thomas Langford, resplendent in a navy tuxedo, its black satin lapels gleaming under the lights. A deep red brocade waistcoat hugged his frame, paired with a white dress shirt, a decorative cravat pinned with a golden brooch, and a blue floral lapel pin trailing a delicate gold chain. His smile was a blade, sharp and calculated, as he worked the crowd, his voice a velvet snare weaving tales of Langford glory. "Tonight," he declared, raising a glass, "we honor a century of unyielding power." Beside him, Margaret Langford glided through pleasantries, her emerald gown a study in understated wealth. She leaned close, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you think she'll show?" Thomas's eyes glinted with malice. "If she dares, she'll wish she hadn't." His gaze swept the room, anticipating the moment he'd orchestrate Amelia Price's public unraveling. A janitor, he thought, foolish enough to step into his arena. The ballroom doors parted, and a hush rippled through the crowd. Amelia Price entered, a vision that stole breath from the unprepared. Her gold satin gown clung to her dark skin, its asymmetrical neckline framing her collarbone with daring elegance. A single embellished spaghetti strap caught the light, while the draped bodice flowed into a floor-length skirt, its high side slit revealing a glimpse of poise with every step. The gown's train trailed like a whisper of defiance, and her long, sleek black hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing the Langford heirloom necklace that gleamed at her throat. Amelia's presence was a quiet storm, her dark eyes scanning the room with serene intensity. The silence was shattered as Thomas seized the microphone, his voice slicing through the murmurs. A janitor thinking she belongs here? Pathetic. The words landed like a whip, raw and venomous, igniting cruel laughter from his allies. Patricia Hayes, a senator's wife swathed in sapphire silk, leaned toward her companion, her voice dripping with scorn. What's she playing at? Strutting in from some back alley like she belongs. A journalist, notepad in hand, scribbled furiously, his smirk betraying his caption. Janitor tries to shine at Langford Gala. The barbs were veiled in sophistication, but their intent was clear. Amelia was an outsider, her audacity an affront to their order. Amelia stood unmoved, her posture regal, as if the venom slid off her like rain. She met Thomas's gaze, her lips curving into a faint, enigmatic smile that unsettled him. The crowd's mockery faltered, some guests shifting uncomfortably, sensing a shift in the air. Amelia's presence defied their expectations, her elegance a silent rebuke to their disdain. She stepped forward, each movement deliberate, her gown catching the light like molten gold. The whispers grew sharper. She must have raided a costume shop, muttered a hedge fund manager, his tone laced with unease. No way she affords that, Patricia hissed, her eyes narrowing. Probably maxed out her credit for this charade. Thomas, emboldened by the crowd's jeers, pressed his advantage. He strode to the stage, microphone in hand, his cravat glinting under the spotlights. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, let's give a warm welcome to Amelia Price, the woman who keeps our offices spotless and now, it seems, fancies herself a star. The laughter swelled, a tidal wave of derision, but Amelia's expression remained serene. Her eyes locked on Thomas with an intensity that made his smirk falter. He pressed on, his voice syrupy with condescension. Amelia, do tell us, where does a janitor find such ambition? Or is this just a bold new cleaning technique? The room roared, but a few guests, those with keener instincts, frowned, sensing the cruelty's edge. Amelia ascended the stage, her steps measured, the train of her gown trailing like a royal mantle. The crowd's laughter dwindled as she reached for the microphone, her fingers steady. Thomas hesitated, caught off guard by her audacity, but handed it over with a mocking bow. Go on, then, he said, loud enough for all to hear. Entertain us. His allies chuckled, but the air grew taut, as if the room itself held its breath. Amelia faced the sea of faces, her voice clear and resonant, cutting through the lingering snickers. Thank you, Mr. Langford, for your gracious invitation, she began, her tone laced with a quiet power that silenced the room. I'm not here to be your amusement. I'm here to tell a story, one you've all forgotten or perhaps never knew. She reached into a small satin clutch, withdrawing a folded document, its edges worn but unmistakable. The crowd leaned forward, curiosity warring with skepticism. Thomas's smile froze, his hand twitching at his side. Patricia Hayes scoffed, her voice carrying. What's this, some forged nonsense from a nobody? Her words, meant to wound, only sharpened Amelia's resolve. She held up the document, a copy of Edward Langford's will, its ink a testament to a truth long buried. This, Amelia said, her gaze sweeping the room, is the legacy you've all celebrated tonight, but only half of it. Her words hung heavy, a challenge that rooted the crowd in place. Even Patricia faltered, her smirk fading as Amelia's composure unnerved her. Thomas's face darkened, his cravat suddenly too tight. Enough of this farce, he snapped, stepping toward her, but Amelia's eyes pinned him in place, her serenity a weapon. You invited me here, Mr. Langford, she said, her voice unwavering. Now you'll hear me out. The room was a powder keg, every guest poised between ridicule and intrigue. Journalists scribbled faster, their cameras flashing, sensing a scandal in the making. Margaret, from the edge of the stage, clutched her champagne flute, her knuckles white. She's making a fool of herself, she whispered to a nearby socialite, but her voice lacked conviction. Amelia's presence, her gown, her poise, her unflinching gaze, defied the narrative they'd crafted. The necklace at her throat caught the light, its engraving a silent promise of truths yet to unfold. As Amelia prepared to speak again, the ballroom doors loomed behind her, a gateway to the reckoning she'd planned for years. Thomas's laughter, once so assured, now rang hollow in his ears. He'd set a trap, but the woman before him was no prey. She was a force clad in gold and armed with secrets, ready to turn his stage into her battlefield. The Empire Grand's ballroom hung in a fragile stillness, the chandelier's glow casting long shadows across the faces of New York's elite. The air crackled with tension, every eye fixed on Amelia Price, who stood center stage, her gold satin gown a beacon of defiance. The document in her hand, a copy of Edward Langford's will, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its worn edges a testament to a truth long suppressed. Amelia's dark eyes burned with purpose, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd, each word a pebble cast into a pond of privilege. "This is no forgery," she said, her tone a blend of steel and sorrow. "It's the legacy of a man you claim to honor, but whose wishes you've betrayed." Thomas Langford, his navy tuxedo now a stifling cage, gripped the edge of the stage, his cravat askew. His face was a mask of fury, but beneath it lurked a flicker of dread. "This is absurd," he bellowed, his voice cracking like thin ice. "You're a liar, spinning tales to tarnish my father's name." He turned to the crowd, arms outstretched, seeking allies. "She's a janitor, for God's sake, a nobody grasping at shadows." His words, meant to rally, fell flat as murmurs of doubt rippled through the room. Amelia's poise, her unyielding gaze, sowed seeds of uncertainty in even the most loyal. Amelia raised the will higher, its pages catching the light. "My name is Amelia Price," she declared, her voice resonating like a bell in the hushed hall. "I am the daughter of Edward Langford and Evelyn Price, his piano tutor, a woman he loved in secret. This document names me as his heir, a truth hidden for decades." She unfolded a yellowed letter, its ink faded but legible, and began to read. "My dearest Evelyn, our daughter is my heart's greatest pride. I will ensure she inherits what is hers, no matter the cost." The words, tender and resolute, hung heavy, silencing the crowd. A senator in the front row shifted uncomfortably, his champagne forgotten. Patricia Hayes, her sapphire gown a stark contrast to her venomous sneer, broke the silence. "A love child? Preposterous!" she scoffed, her voice carrying over the murmurs. "You expect us to believe a maid is a Langford? Go back to your mop." Her words, sharp with disdain, drew nods from a few, but others recoiled, the overt cruelty jarring in the face of Amelia's dignity. A young journalist, her pen pausing, whispered to her colleague, "She's not buckling. There's something real here." Amelia's eyes flicked to Patricia, not with anger, but with a piercing clarity that made the socialite falter, her bravado crumbling. Thomas lunged forward, his face flushed. "Security!" he roared, gesturing wildly. "Remove this fraud before she embarrasses herself further." His voice trembled, betraying the fear gnawing at his core. But Amelia stood her ground, the necklace at her throat glinting like a talisman. "You invited me to speak, Mr. Langford," she said, her tone calm but unyielding. "Now you'll listen." Her defiance was a spark, igniting curiosity in the crowd. Margaret Langford, clutching her emerald clutch, whispered to a friend, "She's delusional, isn't she?" But her voice lacked conviction, her eyes darting to Thomas's sweating brow. The ballroom doors swung open with a thud, and 3 figures entered, their presence shifting the room's gravity. Robert Sullivan, Edward's former lawyer, strode in, his silver hair and tailored suit exuding authority. Beside him was Laura Bennett, an FBI investigator, her sharp features and navy blazer radiating resolve. Trailing them was William Carter, his stooped frame heavy with remorse, his eyes avoiding Thomas's glare. The crowd parted, whispers swelling like a tide. "Who are they?" a tycoon muttered, his cigar forgotten. Amelia stepped back, yielding the stage, her expression one of quiet triumph. Robert Sullivan took the microphone, his voice measured but commanding. "I served Edward Langford for 20 years, he began, his gaze sweeping the room. He amended his will to include his daughter, Amelia Price, born to Evelyn Price. I witnessed the signing, but the document was suppressed after his death. Gasps punctuated his words, the crowd's skepticism warring with intrigue. Laura Bennett stepped forward, holding a forensic report, its stark white pages a stark contrast to the opulence around her. Edward Langford did not die of heart failure, she announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Toxicology reports recently uncovered show he was poisoned with a slow-acting toxin over months. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. A media mogul dropped his glass, the shatter echoing in the stunned silence. Thomas staggered, his hand clutching his brooch as if it could anchor him. "Lies!" he shouted, but his voice was a hollow rasp, drowned by the crowd's rising clamor. "This is a conspiracy to ruin me." His allies, once so vocal, now averted their eyes, their loyalty fraying. Patricia Hayes, her face pale, whispered to her companion, "If this is true, my God, what have we done?" Her words, meant to be private, carried in the charged air, a confession of complicity. William Carter, his hands trembling, spoke next, his voice frail but resolute. "I was Edward's friend," he said, his eyes meeting Amelia's with a plea for forgiveness. "I knew of the will, but I stayed silent, fearing Thomas's wrath. I sent the anonymous letter to force the truth out. Amelia is Edward's daughter, and she deserves her place." His confession was a weight lifted, but it came too late to erase the years of Amelia's struggle. She nodded faintly, acknowledging his words, but her focus remained on the crowd, her mission unfinished. Laura Bennett raised the report, her voice unwavering. "The evidence points to deliberate poisoning, orchestrated to secure the Langford fortune. We're investigating those closest to Edward at the time of his death." Her eyes locked on Thomas, who flinched, his cravat now a noose around his neck. The crowd turned, their gazes shifting from Amelia to Thomas, suspicion replacing their earlier scorn. A journalist's camera flashed, capturing Thomas's ashen face, the image destined for tomorrow's headlines. Amelia reclaimed the stage, her gown shimmering as she faced Thomas. "You thought you could silence me," she said, her voice a quiet blade. "But the truth doesn't bend to your will." Her words were not just for him, but for every guest who'd laughed, every whisper that had cut her. The necklace at her throat seemed to glow, a symbol of her father's love and her resilience. Thomas's hands shook, his voice a desperate snarl. "You'll pay for this, you—" But his words were lost as the crowd's murmurs grew to a roar, the tide turning against him. Margaret gripped her clutch, her face a mask of horror, sensing the empire she'd married into teetering. Amelia stood tall, the will in her hand a beacon of justice, her eyes promising that this was only the beginning. The Empire Grand's ballroom, once a stage for opulent revelry, now pulsed with the raw energy of a courtroom. The chandelier's golden light bathed the crowd in a surreal glow, illuminating faces caught between shock and fascination. Amelia Price stood at the epicenter, her gold satin gown a radiant defiance against the storm she'd unleashed. The air was thick with the scent of fear and expensive perfume, as New York's elite grappled with the unraveling of their carefully curated world. Laura Bennett, the FBI investigator, held the stage. Her navy blazer a stark contrast to the glittering gowns around her. She brandished a dossier, its pages heavy with the weight of truth. "Thomas Langford," she declared, her voice a scalpel, "you've built an empire on lies, and we have the evidence to prove it." Thomas, his navy tuxedo disheveled, stood rooted to the stage, his red brocade waistcoat stained with sweat. His cravat hung loose, the golden brooch glinting mockingly. "This is a witch hunt," he roared, but his voice cracked, a hollow echo in the cavernous room. The crowd, once his loyal court, now watched with predatory curiosity, their allegiance fraying. Amelia, her dark eyes unwavering, observed him with a calm that belied the fire within. She had waited years for this moment, her resolve forged in the shadows of his disdain. Laura opened the dossier, her tone clinical yet damning. "Bank records show you siphoned millions from the Langford Foundation's charity funds, funneled through shell companies disguised as real estate ventures." She held up a printout, its numbers stark against the white paper. "Over 5 years, you laundered $20 million, pocketing the profits while children went hungry. Gasps rippled through the room, the crowd's veneer of civility cracking. A media mogul in the back whispered, "He robbed his charity?" His companion nodded, her pearls clutched tightly. Thomas's face contorted, his hands flailing. "Fabrications!" he spat, pointing at Laura. "You've doctored those records to frame me." But his protests were drowned by the hum of disbelief. Amelia stepped forward, her gown's train whispering across the stage. "You can't dismiss the truth forever," she said, her voice low but piercing, cutting through his bluster. Her necklace caught the light, a silent testament to her father's legacy, now clawing its way to the surface. Laura pressed on, undeterred. "We have a recording," she announced, signaling a technician. The ballroom speakers crackled to life, and Thomas's voice, unmistakable, laced with menace, filled the space. "Grant, if you breathe a word about my father's blood work, you're finished. No hospital will touch you." The words were a noose tightening around Thomas's neck. The crowd recoiled, their murmurs swelling into a cacophony. Patricia Hayes, her sapphire gown now a shroud of embarrassment, clutched her husband's arm. "He threatened the doctor," she hissed, her earlier scorn replaced by dread. Amelia's gaze never left Thomas, her poise a stark contrast to his unraveling. She had spent years in the Langford service, enduring slights like, "She's just a cleaner, no threat," or "She'll never rise above her station." Those words, whispered in boardrooms and corridors, had fueled her mission. Now, as the recording played, she felt a quiet vindication, though her face betrayed no triumph. This was not revenge, it was justice, methodical and unrelenting. Laura flipped to another page. Dr. Harold Grant, Edward Langford's physician, was coerced into falsifying the autopsy report, masking the poison that killed him. She held up a signed affidavit, its ink a damning signature. Grant's testimony, given under oath, confirms Thomas's threats. The crowd's shock deepened, a senator in the front row shaking his head, his tie loosened in disbelief. Journalists scribbled furiously, their cameras capturing Thomas's ashen face, the golden chain on his lapel pin glinting like a shackle. Patricia, desperate to cling to her worldview, muttered to her companion, "She's orchestrating this, that janitor. No way she's this clever." Her words, meant to dismiss Amelia, only underscored her insecurity. A nearby guest, a young heiress, shot her a withering look. "Open your eyes, Patricia. She's outplayed him." Amelia, catching the exchange, allowed herself a fleeting smile, her dignity a shield against their fading barbs. The ballroom doors burst open, and James Langford, Thomas's eldest son, strode in. His tailored suit mirrored his father's, but his eyes burned with a different fire, disgust, tempered by resolve. The crowd parted, their whispers a fevered hum. James took the stage, his voice steady but heavy. "I've known for years my father was a fraud," he said, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Amelia. "She's my sister, and she's the only one brave enough to expose him. I helped her gather the evidence. Bank transfers, emails, Grant's confession. It's all true." The revelation was a thunderbolt, splintering the room's last vestiges of loyalty to Thomas. Margaret Langford, her emerald clutch slipping from her grasp, staggered back, her face a mask of betrayal. "James," she whispered, but her son's eyes were fixed on Amelia, a silent apology in his gaze. Amelia nodded, a flicker of gratitude softening her resolve. She had worked alone for so long, but James's stand was a bridge to a family she'd never known. Thomas lunged toward his son, his voice a raw scream. "You traitor! You're no son of mine!" But his rage was futile, his authority crumbling. Laura signaled, and FBI agents in dark suits entered, their badges glinting under the chandeliers. "Thomas Langford," the lead agent intoned, "you're under arrest for suspicion of murder, money laundering, and fraud." The cuffs clicked around Thomas's wrists, the sound echoing like a gavel. He thrashed, his cravat falling to the floor, but the agents were unyielding, leading him through the crowd. Cameras flashed, capturing the fall of a titan. Journalists shouted questions, their voices a chaotic symphony. "Mr. Langford, did you kill your father? Is Amelia the true heir?" Thomas's face, once a mask of arrogance, was now a portrait of defeat, his eyes darting wildly. Amelia watched, her heart steady, her mission nearing its apex. She had endured years of being dismissed, too low to matter, a board member had sneered once. But now the truth was her crown. The crowd, once complicit in her humiliation, now turned their gaze to Amelia, some with awe, others with shame. Patricia, her defiance crumbling, whispered, "We misjudged her." Her words were a confession, too late to undo the harm. Amelia, standing tall, felt the weight of their stares but carried it with grace. She had not come to gloat but to restore what was stolen, her father's legacy, her rightful place. As Thomas was dragged toward the doors, his shouts fading, the ballroom seemed to exhale. Amelia clutched the will, its pages a lifeline to her past and a map to her future. The agents paused at the threshold, the crowd's eyes shifting between the fallen king and the woman who dethroned him. Amelia's voice when she spoke was soft but resolute. "This is only the beginning," she said, her words a promise that reverberated through the hall, setting the stage for a reckoning yet to unfold. The Empire Grand's ballroom, once ablaze with scandal, had faded into a ghostly quiet, its chandeliers dimmed as dawn crept over Manhattan's skyline. The gala's wreckage, shattered champagne flutes, crumpled napkins, abandoned heels, littered the floor, a testament to the night that had unraveled a dynasty. Amelia Price stood alone on the now empty stage, her gold satin gown catching the first light, its train pooled around her like a victor's mantle. The weight of her triumph settled into her bones, not as elation, but as a solemn duty. The city beyond the windows hummed, oblivious to the seismic shift within these walls. But Amelia knew the truth was no longer hers alone. It was a wildfire, spreading across New York. By morning, headlines screamed across every outlet. Langford tycoon arrested for murder, fraud in hidden heir upends real estate empire. Social media churned with grainy videos of Thomas Langford's cuffed exit, his navy tuxedo a rumpled relic of his former glory. Amelia, however, shunned the spotlight. She slipped out of the hotel through a service exit, her necklace tucked beneath a scarf, and returned to her Brooklyn apartment. The modest space with its worn couch and lavender-scented air felt like a sanctuary. She sat at her table, the will and her mother's letters before her, and allowed herself a single, shuddering breath. The world was watching, but Amelia's focus was inward, on the legacy she would now reshape. At the Langford headquarters, a glass tower piercing the city's heart, Amelia assumed the chairmanship within days. The boardroom, once a bastion of elitism, buzzed with unease as she entered, her presence a quiet revolution. She wore a tailored blazer, her hair swept back, the necklace her only nod to the past. The board, gray-haired men and steely women who'd once dismissed her as just the help, shifted in their seats. "She's not fit to lead," one muttered, his voice low but audible. "Too much drama, not enough pedigree." Amelia's gaze silenced him, her voice firm. "This company thrived on exploitation. That ends now." Her first act was a sweeping reform, fair wages, transparent promotions, and the dissolution of nepotistic policies. She launched the Langford Scholarship Fund, earmarking millions for low-income Black students, and a housing initiative to build affordable homes in underserved neighborhoods. The changes rippled outward, transforming the corporate culture. Janitors and clerks, long invisible, now received bonuses and training programs. A maintenance worker, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, approached Amelia in the hallway. "You've given us dignity," she said, her voice thick. Amelia nodded, her heart tight. She remembered the slights she'd endured, whispers of, "She's only good for cleaning," or "She'll never belong," and vowed to dismantle that legacy. The company's profits, to the board's shock, climbed 35% in 3 months, proof that respect bred loyalty and innovation. Yet not all embraced the shift. A faction of executives, clinging to old hierarchies, grumbled in private. "She's turning this into a charity case," one sneered over cigars, his words echoing the disdain Amelia had faced at the gala. "A woman like her can't sustain this." Their prejudice, veiled in corporate jargon, was a familiar sting, but Amelia countered with results. She hired a diverse leadership team whose expertise silenced doubters, and her vision, rooted in her father's belief in fairness, became the company's new bedrock. Beyond the tower, the city grappled with the scandal's fallout. Thomas's arrest dominated talk shows and editorials, his name a synonym for betrayal. Amelia, thrust into the public eye, declined interviews, letting her actions speak. Her refusal to gloat earned quiet respect, even from former skeptics. A barista at her local coffee shop, recognizing her from the news, slipped her a free latte with a note. "Keep fighting." Amelia tucked it away, a small reminder of the lives her story touched. In the Langford family, fractures deepened. Margaret, Thomas's wife, filed for divorce, her emerald gowns packed away as she prepared to leave Manhattan. She sought Amelia in the company's executive suite, her face drawn, her voice trembling. "I didn't know," she said, twisting a silk scarf in her hands. "I stood by while they treated you like nothing. I'm sorry." Amelia's expression softened, but her resolve held firm. "You weren't the one who wronged me," she replied, "but your children deserve a chance to be more than his shadow." Margaret nodded, tears brimming, and left with her two younger children, vowing to shield them from their father's shame. Amelia watched her go, her heart heavy but unburdened by hatred. In the weeks that followed, a letter arrived at Amelia's office, its prison postmark unmistakable. Thomas's handwriting, once bold, was now shaky, his words a plea for forgiveness. "I was blind, consumed by greed. Please let me make amends." Amelia read it in silence, her fingers tracing the necklace at her throat. The man who dismissed her as pathetic now begged for mercy, but she felt no urge to respond. Justice, not vengeance, had been her aim, and the truth was now free. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, a relic of a battle won. Outside the company, Amelia's reforms sparked broader change. The scholarship fund awarded its first grants, and the housing project broke ground in Harlem, where she'd once walked past crumbling tenements. A community leader, at the groundbreaking, clasped Amelia's hand. "You're one of us," he said, "and you're changing the game." Amelia smiled, her mind flashing to her mother's lessons. Build, don't break. She was doing just that, brick by brick, life by life. Yet the echoes of bias lingered. At a charity event, a donor in a pinstripe suit muttered to his wife, "She's impressive, but too focused on her people. It's divisive." His words, cloaked in politeness, were a reminder of the gala's slights, but Amelia overheard and met his gaze. "Divisive," she said, her voice calm but pointed. "I'm building homes for those you've ignored. If that divides us, so be it." The man flushed, retreating, and Amelia turned away, her focus unbroken. As spring warmed the city, Amelia stood on her apartment's fire escape, the skyline a tapestry of possibility. The company, once a monument to greed, now bore her father's true vision: fairness, opportunity, dignity. She clutched a photo of her mother, Evelyn, whose strength had guided her through years of scorn. Amelia's journey, born in the shadows of a janitor's uniform, had led her here, to a legacy she'd not only reclaimed, but redefined. The city below pulsed with stories yet untold, but Amelia knew her work was far from done. The truth had toppled a tyrant, but building a just world required more than one night's victory. With the necklace glinting at her throat, she stepped back inside, ready to face whatever came next, her heart anchored by a single certainty. She was no longer invisible, and her voice would never be silenced again. The Langford headquarters, a glass monolith piercing Manhattan's skyline, had transformed from a cold fortress of privilege into a beacon of possibility. 6 months after the gala that shattered a dynasty, Amelia Price stood in the executive suite, her silhouette framed against a city aglow with twilight. Her tailored navy dress, accented by the heirloom necklace, spoke of authority earned, not inherited. The office, once Thomas Langford's domain of arrogance, now bore Amelia's touch. Walls adorned with framed letters from scholarship recipients and blueprints for affordable housing. The air carried the faint scent of fresh paint, a metaphor for the renewal she'd ignited. Amelia's dark eyes, steady with purpose, surveyed the horizon, her heart tethered to a vision her father, Edward, had dreamed but never lived to see. New York buzzed with her story, a saga that had transcended headlines to become a touchstone of resilience. Invitations to speak at Ivy League universities and global summits piled on her desk. But Amelia declined them all. "I'm not here to be a symbol of suffering," she told a persistent reporter, her voice firm yet warm. "I want my work to speak, my father's true legacy." Instead, she poured her energy into the Langford Empire, now a model of equity. The company's community centers in underserved neighborhoods, funded by redirected profits, offered job training and childcare. The Evelyn Price Fund, named for her mother, empowered women of color to launch businesses, its first grants sparking ventures from bakeries to tech startups. Amelia, walking through one center, watched a young mother pitch her business plan, her pride echoing Evelyn's lessons. Rise no matter the odds. Yet the city's elite, bruised by the gala's revelations, whispered dissent. At a rooftop fundraiser, a financier in a velvet blazer leaned toward his companion, his voice low. "She's capable, but it's all so performative." Langford's lost its prestige. His words, cloaked in sophistication, reeked of the same bias Amelia had faced. "She's not one of us." She overheard, her necklace glinting as she turned, her smile disarming but sharp. "Prestige built on lies crumbles," she said, her tone slicing through his pretense. "I'm building something that lasts." The financier faltered, his glass trembling, and Amelia moved on, her focus unbroken by their petty jabs. The public, however, embraced her. A mural in Harlem, vibrant with hues of gold and blue, depicted Amelia's silhouette, captioned "Justice Rises." School children wrote her letters, their scrawled words thanking her for scholarships that opened doors. At a corner bodega, an elderly cashier slipped her a candy bar, grinning. "You're making us proud, mija." Amelia tucked the gesture into her heart, a counterweight to the elite's disdain. Her reforms, fair wages, diverse hiring, had boosted the company's reputation, drawing talent from corners Thomas had ignored. A young engineer promoted from the mailroom told her, "You saw me when no one else did." Amelia nodded, her throat tight, remembering the years she'd been invisible, dismissed as just a cleaner. William Carter, the man whose silence had once aided Thomas's crimes, sought redemption as Amelia's advisor. His office, a modest corner of the tower, was lined with files on community projects. "You've taught me courage," he said during a meeting, his voice thick with regret. "I should have spoken sooner." Amelia met his gaze, her expression measured. "Regret doesn't erase the past," she replied, "but your work now helps." She kept him at arm's length, her trust hard-won, but valued his expertise, channeling it into initiatives like a shelter for domestic violence survivors. The shelter's opening, attended by tearful families, was a quiet victory, its walls echoing her mother's strength. The media, hungry for her story, pressed for drama. A tabloid ran a headline, "Langford's New Queen or Passing Fad." Its subtext, laced with prejudice, suggested Amelia's rise was a fluke, her leadership unfit for a true empire. She countered in a rare NBC interview, her voice calm but unyielding. "They're not angry I'm leading. They're angry I'm leading without their permission." Her words, broadcast nationwide, sparked rallies in Brooklyn, where crowds chanted her name. Amelia watched the footage from her apartment, her heart swelling, but her mind stayed on the work. Budgets to balance, communities to uplift. Within the company, resistance lingered. A senior executive, his tie knotted with old money pride, cornered her after a board meeting. "Your focus on equity is noble, but it's alienating our traditional clients," he said, his smile patronizing. Amelia's eyes narrowed, her voice like tempered steel. "Our clients want results, not relics of exclusion. If they leave, others will come." Her confidence, rooted in data, record-high contracts from diverse firms, silenced him. She'd learned to navigate their coded slights, turning their bias into fuel for her mission. One evening, Amelia hosted a ceremony in the company's atrium, its glass ceiling reflecting a starlit sky. Employees from custodians to directors filled the space, their faces alight with pride. She stood at a podium, her necklace catching the light, and honored long-serving staff with awards and raises. "This company is yours, Oi," she said, her voice resonating. "You're not just workers. You're its heart." The applause was thunderous, a stark contrast to the gala's cruel laughter. She announced the Evelyn Price Fund's expansion, pledging millions more to women entrepreneurs. A single mother, a recent grant recipient, embraced Amelia, whispering, "You're changing my daughter's future." Amelia's eyes glistened, her mother's memory alive in the moment. As the event ended, Amelia lingered, watching employees share stories over coffee. The atrium, once a sterile showcase of wealth, now hummed with community. She thought of the gala, of the voices that had mocked her, "She'll never belong," and felt a quiet peace. Those voices were fading, drowned by the lives she was lifting. The company, under her stewardship, had become a testament to Edward's dream, a world where merit, not birth, defined worth. Back in her Brooklyn apartment, Amelia sat on her couch, a mug of tea warming her hands. The city's pulse thrummed outside, a reminder of the work ahead. She opened a letter from a scholarship student, its words scrawled with hope. "Because of you, I'm the first in my family to go to college." Amelia smiled, her heart full. The elite could whisper, the tabloids could sneer, but she was building something unshakable, a legacy not of power, but of possibility. As moonlight spilled through her window, Amelia touched the necklace, its engraving a link to her father's love. She was no longer the janitor in the shadows, but a leader forging a path for others. The city, vast and unforgiving, was hers to reshape, one act of justice at a time. Manhattan's heartbeat thrummed through the steel and glass of the Langford headquarters, but within its walls, a quieter revolution unfolded. Amelia Price stood in the executive suite, her reflection in the window blending with the city's twilight glow. Her tailored charcoal suit was softened by the heirloom necklace, its engraved pendant a silent vow to her father's dream. The office, once a shrine to Thomas Langford's hubris, now held photos of community projects and letters from grateful employees. The air was crisp with purpose, scented by the jasmine plant Amelia had placed on her desk, a nod to her mother's love for quiet beauty. 9 months after the gala that toppled an empire, Amelia was no longer just a survivor. She was a creator, weaving a legacy from the ashes of betrayal. The city had not forgotten Thomas's fall. His trial, a media circus, had ended with a 32-year sentence for murder, money laundering, fraud, and extortion. His fortune, once a shield, was seized to compensate victims, including Amelia, though she funneled her share into the Langford Scholarship Fund. From his prison cell, Thomas penned another letter, its ink smudged with desperation. "I see now the monster I became. Please give me a chance to atone." Amelia read it in her office, her fingers steady on the necklace. The man who'd sneered pathetic at her gold-clad defiance now begged for absolution, but she felt no need to reply. Justice had spoken, its verdict etched in the lives she was rebuilding. The letter joined its predecessor in a drawer, a closed chapter. Amelia's new home in Brooklyn, a cozy brownstone with ivy-clad walls, was a haven of warmth. There she raised Evelyn, a 6-year-old girl she'd adopted, named for her mother. The child's laughter filled the space, a balm for years spent in shadows. One evening, Amelia knelt beside Evelyn at a small desk, guiding her through a math worksheet. "You're strong like your namesake," Amelia said, brushing a braid from the girl's face. "No one can take that away unless you let them." Evelyn's eyes, bright with trust, mirrored Amelia's resolve. The brownstone's walls, lined with books and family photos, bore witness to a life reclaimed, not just for herself, but for a child who'd known too much loss. The Langford Empire, under Amelia's stewardship, had become a national model. Its community centers now dot the Bronx and Queens, offering free tutoring and job fairs. The Evelyn Price Fund had launched a dozen new businesses, their owners, women of color, thanking Amelia at a recent gala, not the Empire Grand's cruel stage, but a vibrant Brooklyn venue filled with hope. Yet the elite's whispers persisted. At a museum benefit, a philanthropist in a velvet tuxedo muttered to his wife, "She's impressive, but Langford's no longer ours. Too much focus on the margins." His words, polished but poisonous, echoed the gala's slights. Amelia, overhearing, approached with a serene smile. "The margins," she said, are where the future is built. Join us or be left behind. The man blinked, disarmed, and Amelia glided away, her necklace catching the light. Her story had ignited a movement. Protests for corporate accountability cited her name, and a documentary, The Heir Unseen, was in production, though Amelia declined to appear. "Let the work be the star," she told the director, her voice unwavering. The public's adoration was fierce. A subway rider slipped her a handwritten note. "You're our hero." But critics, steeped in bias, sneered. A conservative columnist wrote, "Her reforms are a fad, diluting a legacy with populist stunts." Amelia, in an NBC interview, countered with quiet power. "They fear a world where power isn't hoarded. I'm not here to appease them. I'm here to change the game." Her words, broadcast to millions, sparked cheers in community centers, where families saw their struggles reflected in her fight. One afternoon, Amelia visited a Harlem housing project, its new buildings rising where decay once reigned. Residents gathered, their applause warm as she cut the ribbon. A grandmother, her hands calloused from years of labor, clasped Amelia's arm. "You've given us a home, not just walls." Amelia's throat tightened, her mind flashing to her mother's rented rooms, where dreams had fought to survive. She'd built this for them, for every soul dismissed as lesser as she'd been. The company's atrium, once a sterile showcase, now hosts monthly town halls. Amelia stood at a podium, her voice resonating as she shared plans for a mental health program for employees. "You're not cogs in a machine," she said, her eyes meeting those of a young custodian. "You're the reason we thrive." The crowd, janitors, accountants, executives, roared, their unity a stark contrast to the gala's division. A board member, once skeptical, admitted privately, "You've made us better." Amelia nodded, her heart steady, knowing the fight wasn't over. In her brownstone, Amelia sat with Evelyn, reading a letter from Edward, its faded ink a bridge to a father she'd never known. "I dream of a world where love outweighs greed," he'd written. She closed her eyes, feeling his pride in the empire she'd reshaped. Not a monument to wealth, but a sanctuary of opportunity. The city's pulse thrummed outside, a reminder of battles yet to come. But Amelia was ready, her necklace a talisman of her unbreakable will. Her final act that month was a quiet one. At the headquarters, she unveiled a portrait of Edward, restored to its rightful place beside a plaque. "Justice is a journey, not a destination." Employees gathered, their faces reflecting the change she'd wrought. A young intern, her voice shy, said, "You've shown us what's possible." Amelia smiled, her heart full. The elite could scorn, the critics could doubt, but she'd built something enduring, a legacy where dignity was the currency, not gold. As night fell, Amelia stood on her brownstone stoop, Evelyn asleep upstairs. The city stretched before her, vast and alive. She touched the necklace, its weight a promise kept. Thomas had sought to break her, but she'd risen, not to destroy, but to create. Her victory was not his ruin, but the lives she'd lifted, the futures she'd forged. Amelia Price, once unseen, was now a beacon, her story a testament that justice, when fought for with heart and truth, could remake the world. What an incredible journey we've shared through the justice at the Langford Gala. Amelia's triumph over injustice is a testament to resilience and truth. How did her story resonate with you? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share what moved you, what inspired you, or how you'd face such a challenge. Your voice matters, and we're eager to connect with you. A huge thank you for joining us on this gripping tale. Your support fuels our passion for storytelling. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that spark hope and courage, and let us know where you're tuning in from. Until next time, keep seeking justice in your way, and we'll meet again soon with another unforgettable saga. Stay inspired and take care.